Hello and welcome to this second video about using Reflection Designer, which is a new script product for DAZ Studio. Now, in the first video, we learned how to use Reflection Designer Move Camera and Reflection Designer Move Reflection. In this video, we're going to be looking at Reflection Designer. Now, the important thing to understand about Reflection Designer is that it is a complementary product to a previous product that Riversoft Art and I released earlier this year through DAZ, which is called Lighting Designer. And if you own Lighting Designer, you're going to have additional functionality within Reflection Designer that we're going to see in just a moment. But to begin this, first of all, I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to choose the car, which is called the Ranger. Now that I have this selected, I'm going to make sure that I have the tool of the geometry editor that just like we saw in the last video. And I do want to point out to you that I'm currently using render settings that come with Lighting Designer. So if I just come over here into my scripts, I look for Lighting Designer and I twirl this open. Under Render Presets, you'll find that there's one called LD Studio Lighting Base in the Lighting Designer product. If you own it, you can use the same one. The only difference between what you see here and what I'm using right now is I set the tone mapping down to 5 instead of 6.5 to make the whole scene a little bit brighter. But other than that, if you have Lighting Designer, you can do this exact same thing. So I'm just going to come back over here to Reflection Designer and I'm going to focus on working with this on this object. Now, the basic idea of working with Reflection Designer is really very simple. It's just like what we saw before. We select a polygon where we want the reflection to be, and then it's going to create that reflection for us there using various different presets. We'll get into that in just one moment. But first, I just want to show you what the scene actually looks like. So I'm going to come over here and preview this in iRay. It's going to take a second to load that. And I want to analyze what's going on and what's right and what's wrong about this particular scene. So you can see we have this very, very shiny object, car paint, metal, glass, and there's really not a lot of detail. Everything looks very flat and kind of formless. And the reason why is because there's really not much to reflect. I mean, we have the ground plane, which you can see here, and then we have the environment, and that's basically all we have in here. So we need to create some reflections to create some excitement, interest, and pop out the details of this particular object. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and begin by making a selection. I already have a selection active. You can see it's over here on the handle. If you can't see that, then I'm just going to come out of this real quick. I'm going to go back over here to hidden line and I'm going to go over here into perspective view and I'm going to show you, there it is. That was a selection I made right there on that handle. And the reason why I made that selection is because I want to pop out that angle. There's a little angle right there for the handle of the door. And I want to pop that out. So by choosing that polygon and then coming over here into the camera that we want to view, we're ready to go ahead and go into Reflection Designer. Now, if you own Lighting Designer, you will have additional presets that you will see here, like I have. If you don't own Lighting Designer, then all you will see is these reflection light planes. There's 40 of them, and they're actually quite versatile. However, if you own Lighting Designer, you'll also have this non-emissive, plain outdoor, plain studio, spotlight outdoor, and spotlight studio categories that you can use in addition. But I'm just going to go ahead and focus on these reflection light planes. Now, they may look a little plain. And the reason why is because instead of having to worry about an outdoor or an indoor calibrated light or worrying about different color temperatures, here we can do all of that with these sliders down below. And I'm going to get into that. And so you'll see what I mean when I say that this is a lot more flexible. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here and choose a preset. And you can see we have a number of different presets. We actually have 40 of these. And they're more or less designed so that you can try a bunch of different styles of lighting until you get the results that you want. So maybe for this particular lighting, I might come over here and try a ring light. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. I'm going to turn on the iRay preview. You're going to see that this is going to be on camera. We don't necessarily want that. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the distance of that. You can also see this ring light is going to appear not just on that little angle, but also over here in the back of the mirror and over here in the car. So maybe a ring light isn't exactly what we want, but I'm just going to go ahead and set this to be 500 centimeters, which is 5 meters. Hit tab just so that will be accepted, and it's going to move it off of camera. And you can see now it's a lot less obvious, right? Because there's a lot more distance. Now, of course, we can also scale this up. So if we wanted this to be a much larger circle, we could make it much bigger. And you can begin to see that arc coming in over here. And I could just make that even bigger if I wanted to. And the larger I make it, the more you'll see that ring, right? So you can see the ring is here. You can see the ring is there. And it's also popping a little light there. But this really isn't the right preset. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit reset. That's going to get rid of that light preset in the scene. And I'm going to choose a different one. So maybe in this case, the one I want to use is the showroom window right here. So again, it's going to come back in on camera because it's reset back to a distance of 100. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it back to a distance of 500. And you can see that we have a reflection here and we also have a reflection there. And it's not providing us with a lot of information right now. The reason why is because it's pretty small and it's pretty dark. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to set the scale up and maybe, somewhere around 300, it should be fine. So you can see now we're getting a much larger scale here and a much larger scale over here in terms of this. Then I can come over here and I can change the luminance. Now, this is also something very important if you're doing like an outdoor scene or an HDR that has a really high EV, something like an EV of 13 or something like that. Right now we're an EV of 5, which a low luminance is going to give us nice bright highlights here. But if we were outside in like the sunlight, we'd be using an EV of 13 and we would need a lot more luminance. So just being able to change the luminance on the fly here really makes it possible to get all those little details. But you can see by adding this light here, we're getting light glint off of these various metal parts. We're catching some information on the mirror. We're catching the information on the handles of the door. We're catching the information up here on the headlight. I mean, it's bringing a whole lot more information into the scene. So it's really important that you choose the right spot for where you want to be focusing your polygon. But once you have the right spot, and that comes with experience, this is something that you will have to play with until you get a feel for what are the right spots. But this is a good spot for the type of detail that I want to catch out. Once you have the right spot, then it's a simple matter of trying the different planes and then adjusting the parameters until you get what you want. In this particular case, I want something that's going to be more like an outside blue. And if you know how color temperature works, if we make the color temperature lower, it's going to be warmer. That's not what we want in this case. We actually want it to be bluer. So I'm going to take it all the way up to 10,000. 10,000 is the same blue that you would get from a blue clear sky. So this basically looks like a clear blue sky coming through the windows. Now, if I didn't want to use the color temperature, if I wanted to choose a specific color, what I would do is I would set this back to 6,500, hit tab to accept that. This will be what's considered pure white. Once you have that, you can come over here and you can choose any color you want to with the color picker. So if I wanted, say, a pink, I can choose that pink. And now I have a pink emitter in my scene. Now, if instead you wanted to use the color temperature, it's a good idea to always leave this set to white and use the color temperature slider. You don't really want to mix them because you can get unpredictable results. So you choose one or the other. If you're going to use the color, set the temperature for 6,500. If you're going to use the temperature, set the color for white. And that way you'll get precise results. Now, in addition to this, we also have the auto aim. So the auto aim is making sure that this polygon is pointed directly at that so that we're getting the reflection where we want it. If you turn this off, it's not going to aim that polygon. You can see it actually kind of flops it right into our way. But we do have an X rotation or Y rotation and a Z rotation where we can manually rotate it to get it into a specific location if that's what we wanted to do. However, my experience has been the auto aim is going to give me the results that I want pretty much always. So I almost never turn that off. Now, that said, we also have down here the camera controls. So just like what we saw in the previous scripts, I can zoom out so I can see what this is doing. I can also work in the latitude, which is going around, or I can work in the longitude, which is going below or above. So I can see my scene. Once I'm happy with this, I just come over here and set reset camera. That'll put me back to where I was. And now that I have what I'm happy with here, and again, I'll probably just take this temperature back up to 10,000 so that we get that blue sky look. I'm going to hit accept, and it's going to kick me back out of the script. And now I've got a reflection light plane in my scene. Now, in addition to what we just got done seeing, the planes themselves can have special properties depending upon which one it is that we're working with. In this particular case, the reflection light plane is a showroom window. And this is going to be based off of a procedural shader that I created that will allow you to change the number of columns and the border width as well as the number of rows and the border height. And we can also clip the borders. And what I mean by that is if I come over here and I go to perspective view, and I'm just going to go ahead and frame up on that reflection light plane so that we can actually see this. So we'll just go ahead and get a quick look at this plane. I'm going to go ahead and switch over here to iRay real quick so that you can see this. You can see that the borders are solid right now. And if I wanted to change the color of the borders, I could. So I can make the borders an emitter as well. So you see there's this border color option. If I click this, I can make the borders say like a hot magenta color. And you'll see that they become that hot magenta color. So this is actually very flexible in the sense that you can create a design element here. But you can also change, like I said, the border width. You can change the number of rows. You can change the border height, get whatever it is that you need here in terms of the various different things. But that said, if you don't want to see that border at all, if you just want it to be out of there, you just want these to be like, say, looking like individual lights, then what you can do is you can come over here and choose clip borders. And once you've done that, it basically applies those borders as a cutout opacity onto this. And once you've done that, this will then become something like a bunch of little individual panes. Instead of being one big plane, it'll be a bunch of individual panes. And with a lot of these presets, you can do these types of adjustments after the fact. So if you're finding something that's very close to what it is that you wanted, but it's not exactly right, I'm just going to switch back over here to camera one so that we can view how this change is on the car. You can see, we can see the panes a little bit more clearly now. Maybe that was something that I wanted from this preset. Maybe yeah, I like the preset overall, but I wanted there to be more, a little bit more visual separation between the planes. Well, what I can do is I can make those adjustments until I'm happy with it, and then there it is. So it's all procedural. It all happens in real time within iRay. Now, like I said, many of the presets will have those types of controls. Either these types of procedural controls, depending upon if it's using this gobo type of effect. This is really called the automotive overhead shader preset. But if you have a preset that has these controls, these would be the controls that you would have. Now, you can also have a different type of a shader preset that you might be using. I'm going to come back over here to hidden line and I'm going to show you one. So maybe I'm going to go ahead and go back over here to perspective mode and then go back over here to the car ranger. And remember, I have a polygon currently selected. So I'm just going to come over here and choose my geometry selection and clear selection so that when I frame this, it'll actually frame up on the car instead of framing up on that polygon that I had selected. So maybe here what I want to do is I want to go ahead and select something like, say, the hood of the car. So you can see I got too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in on this. There we go. Actually, that looks pretty good. That's exactly what I wanted. That one right there. So I go back over here to camera one. I'm going to go over here to reflection designer. And I'm going to choose a different one that I know for sure has the properties that I'm looking for. So I'm going to choose the fluorescent spotlight. So this is going to be over here, and I can see this by choosing the iRay preview. And again, this is about the angle where it needs to be in order for it to shine on that particular spot and create the reflection that we're looking to create. So all I need to do is I can change the scale on this one so that it's off of the camera. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scale on this one. And that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So I've created my reflection there. Maybe I'll make this one warmer and I'll change the luminance down, something, maybe not quite that. That went into the negative territory. Yeah, there we go. So now I've got something that's creating an interesting reflection here. Now, you can do any number of things that you want, right? I'm just doing this so that you can see that the reflection is right there. But what's really important about this one is the preset itself. So again, you choose the right spot and you'll get the reflection that you want. But what I'm really trying to show you right now is not so much how to place a reflection, but what the shader parameters are. So I'm going to come over here to surfaces once I have that plane selected. And you're going to see that we have a two-part shader. So the idea here is that we have a luminance image and then we have a hotspot image. And the idea here is that you can combine the luminance image and the hotspot image as well as the luminance value here and the hotspot luminance until you get exactly the results that you're looking for. So you can see that the controls that were in the script changed the luminance here down to 260, but it left this hotspot luminance where it was by default, which is 1500. So in order to make this maybe more comfortable, I'm going to set this down to something like 500. And you can see that it's going to change what we're going to see when we go back over here to iRay. So I'll show you what that looks like. You'll see in just one second. So you can see that that's not as bright as it was before. Now I can drop that all the way down to say something like 100 and hit tab, and you'll see it's going to darken independently of the background. So if you want the hotspot to be bright, you just increase the hotspot luminance. If you want the hotspot to be dark, then you just decrease. Now you don't need a hotspot at all. And if you go ahead and choose none for the image, then the hotspot will go away and all that will be used will be the base luminance image, which is just a basic thing. Now you have a number of hotspots that you can choose. So I'll just come over here and go to browse. And you can find we have hotspot 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So maybe I'll choose hotspot 5. And that's going to give me a more pointed hotspot, something like that. And because that one's smaller, maybe I can go up to something like 250 for the luminance on that one to get it brighter. And I can also move that hotspot. So right now you can see where that hotspot is. It's at the top. And you can see over here we have a hotspot scale X, a hotspot scale Y. Then we have a hotspot position X and a hotspot position Y. So if I come over here and I move my position Y, you're going to see that the position is going to change. You see how it moved down over here? If I move the position X, you're going to see the position is going to change again. So the idea here is that you could reposition that hotspot within the shader very easily. And you can also change the scale. So maybe in this particular case, I'm going to want the scale to be very high on the X, but I'm going to want the scale to be very narrow on the Y. So something like that right there. And you can see that that's going to change the way that that whole thing looks. So you can adjust the hotspot independent of the main luminance image and intensity. And that will give you some really interesting combinations. But then there's an additional layer of complexity here that really makes this something special, and that is the emission color and the hotspot color. So the emission color, remember I told you before, if we take this back to 6,500, that will be pure white. So I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to say 6,500. This is going to make the emitter back to a pure white. I'm going to change the emission color to something like, say, salmon color that you can see right there. And I'm going to change the hotspot color to something like a green so that you can really, really see this. And you're going to see that it's going to mix the two. You can see that there's green. And in this particular case, what I need to do is I just need to change the hotspot scale up a bit so that we can see this more clearly. But you can see we have a green hotspot with a salmon color light. So the idea here is that if you want these two-part lights in your reflections, in terms of designing really interesting reflections, you can easily set that up by loading whatever luminance image you want, and then whatever hotspot image you want, and then changing the hotspot color, the hotspot luminance, the hotspot scale on X and Y, and the hotspot position on X and Y. And you can then have that positioned wherever you want and have it whatever color you want on whatever kind of base that you want. And so this is another one of those shaders that I made specifically for this product. It's different from the other because it's not as procedural, it's more texture based. But the idea here is that once you have the base preset that you want to use from Reflection Designer's library, you can then go into many of these and change them after the fact to get even more complex effects. So don't think of them as being this basic thing that's kind of boring. Not only can you change the parameters inside the script itself, but then after you've exited the script and you have it where you want it to be, you can come over here into the surfaces and change the shader parameters to get exactly what it is that you want in your reflection to create the types of reflections that you want. Now, like I said, this is not something that I actually wanted. I just wanted to use this as an example. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one out. And you can see we got back to the place where we were before. So I'm just going to go back over here into texture shaded, and that'll be it for this video. Thank you.